All right, welcome to Chronic Illness Life Unfiltered. I am Sam, and I guess I'm your host, allegedly. This is Devin, my best friend, and she's going to be our honorary co-host slash guest for the next question mark amount of time. So,
Exactly. Here for a fun time. We'll see what happens.
indeed. So, Devin and I have a lot of topics that we want to discuss in the podcast that both apply to the chronic illness community and also probably parents with kids with chronic illnesses as well. I fall under both of those categories. And then we also both fall under the category of providers. And that, I think, wearing all those hats makes us, it has a very different feel and we have a different perspective than a lot of other people. So I think this is going to be a good time, and hopefully we'll be able to enlighten a few people on some topics that they wouldn't otherwise know about. Maybe?
Yeah, I'm like enlighten, make them think about it, have them even know that it exists. Pick a target.
Yeah, I mean that's essentially all that I want to get out of this is that I want people to understand what the community is facing, and I feel like right now the elephant in the room is Trump 2.0. I hate to even say it because regardless of what your political views are or have been for the last question mark amount of years, Trump is truly a political candidate that has surpassed all of the. I don't know. I mean, he doesn't fall under the category of Republican or Democrat at this point. I mean, MAGA has become its own thing. And as people in the chronic illness community, I think we're all shaking in our boots a little bit because we have no idea what the hell's going to happen here.
Yeah, I feel like personally, I try to even avoid his name. I'm just like, you know that thing that's coming? And everyone knows what I mean. And I'm just like, it's not like he who must not be named, right? It's not like I actually fear that. I just am like, I don't want to give him credence. Like, I don't want to hear his voice. I don't want to see his face. Like, I don't want to. But I also can't stop thinking about it, right? So it's that
Right.
horrible dynamic of I don't want to give him the power, but also literally he's about to have all of the power. And so we're just along for the ride to some extent of who
Yeah.
knows what's coming. I mean, I don't know about you, but I feel like having a chronic illness to begin with, some people overplan, some people underplan. I'm in the underplan category. I'm like, dude, I don't know where my health's going to be next week, let alone next year. Whatever happens, happens. Let's see. And that's feel like how I'm approaching Trump too. I'm like, well, shit's gonna suck. But I don't know what flavor of bad we're gonna get.
Yeah.
Like I'm trying to prepare, but also I feel like I have no idea how to prepare. So I'm just like, it's just
Yeah,
it's such a fun place to be.
I think that's the challenge that everybody in our community is facing right now. I think I'm kind of bordering on the over preparing category because I'm not a doomsday prepper by any means because when Armageddon happens, I have nothing to prove. I don't care. Take me out. Like I don't want to survive the apocalypse. No desire whatsoever.
That was literally a topic on the call the other night. We do this Friday call with teens and young adults, and people were literally like, how would you survive the apocalypse or how would you prepare for it? And all of us were like, we won't. Like we don't want to live through the apocalypse. Like losing meds, losing the basic stuff we need to survive. It would not be a fun time. Like I have
Literally
no
throw me in the
desire.
garbage.
Yeah, like zero desire to be on the other side of the zombie apocalypse. Like nope, not a hard pass. Thank you, but no thank you.
I think the thing that I'm struggling with is the Health and Human Services and the Centers for Medicaid and Medicaid Services. That's what scares the crap out of me. Because let's be honest, RFK Jr. is a scary, scary man, and there's nothing redeeming about him. And he has no qualifications to be the Secretary of Health and Human Services. And so that scares the shit out of me. I'm not going to lie.
See, I so there's many coping mechanisms. One of mine is info gathering. Right, like I'm that person that goes down the Google wormhole.
Yeah.
So I made the maybe not best self-care decision to read Project 2025. I haven't made it all the way through yet.
Oh God.
I have to do it in little 10-minute increments or else I can't handle life. Um,
Yeah.
but I did start with the Health and Human Services one because I was like, if I'm gonna tap out, I want to have read that one yet.
Right.
And gosh, was it painful to read. But I will say there was one or two dashes of hope in it. I
All
don't
right.
trust them to maintain the hope, but I will say one was improving telehealth. Now they want to do telehealth across all state lines because they want people to be able to find whatever off the wall doctor that doesn't believe in science they want to. But for us, I think that that would actually be helpful for the rare
Yeah.
disease community, more telehealth options. The other option, as a provider that I do appreciate, is they want to have it where you only have to be licensed in the state you live in, again, to promote telehealth and to promote the weird people that believe in drinking bleach. Um, but again, for rare disease families, could you imagine how much it actually would be helpful if a doctor like the people at the main Mito centers could see patients all over the US via telehealth if they wanted to? I mean, granted, it'd really screw up all of our wait lists and it might be really hard to get into some of these people, but that is my only drop of hope I'm holding on to is I'm like,
Right.
maybe by accident they'll do something that actually helps us. Now, to your point, if they get rid of all Medicaid to begin with, it doesn't help if you can see any doctor if you can't afford to see any doctor.
Right.
But yeah, it's so bad. It's such a painful thing to read. I had to take a break with the new year and I'm like trying to get myself to go back into it. It's just so hard. It's so hard. But I hope that maybe one or two things get through that we can hold on to on on the other side of this nightmare and keep
Yeah.
that could be helpful.
Yeah. I mean, he does talk about improving, the food, the quality of our food. And I do think that that's a huge thing that needs to be done because Americans are, I mean, there's an obesity epidemic. There's no question. Like heart disease and stuff it's the leading cause of death in the US. But he's not the one to solve that because he doesn't have the capabilities or the knowledge to do it. So, does he have a point in this? Absolutely. But unpasteurized milk is not the way to do it. And that's kind of what he's hanging his hat on right now, plus all the animal abuse allegations, notwithstanding.
He's just hanging his hat on whatever benefits corporations, right?
Yeah,
Corporations want to be able to sell their drugs across all state borders. Corporations want to be able to have you see the weird doctor that will order their expensive thing.
yeah,
Corporations want no regulation on our food. He claims it'll have a good outcome, but like, let's be real. Forget rid of the regulation on food. We're not going to have better food. We're going to have more red dye 40 everywhere. Like,
right. They did just pass the FDA just passed a um I think they're eliminating red dye.
again, though, do we trust anything right now? Like,
No,
that's,
I know. I'm just saying like
I
it's just
know.
interesting that all this stuff is happening before 47 is even in office. It's like 46 isn't even president right now, even though until the 20th, allegedly, he's president.
Well, but the red dye 40, is that really 47? Or is that people trying to get through whatever they can before it goes to hell? Because I feel like that's more of it. They know he's going to get rid of regulations, so they're trying to push through regulations while they can.
But you know that 47 is going to try to take all the credit for all of this, just like he's trying to do with everything. I mean, this is just, it's sad. And the other part of it that's scaring me is the whole Department of Government Efficiency, headed by billionaires, of course.
Mm.
And, when they talk about government efficiency, what's the first thing that they're going to cut? Social programs,
Yeah.
Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. Those are the things that they're first on the chopping block because they cost millions in federal spending, if not billions.
Yeah. I mean, that was honestly one of the scariest things reading the book was how not just chop it, but how they want to tie on all of these very backwards ideas to what they keep. Like you can get aid if it's a two-parent household only, or you can get child for child support if you keep them in your home, or if you this, or if you do that. And it's all of this like it's
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 like
just
red tape
obvious what they're
essentially.
trying to do. It's so obvious they're trying to do. And just take out everyone who has any
Yeah,
diversity.
I do feel like Musk is gonna get the boot at some point, though. I mean, he's gonna make some decision that's gonna make 47 real mad, and
Do you think
47's
is anyone going to survive? How many people in the last term stayed the whole way through?
that's just it. I mean, he's gonna make do something to make him mad, and it's not gonna matter how much money he's contributed. All bets are going to be off, and he's gonna be done. But my concern is how much damage is he going to do in the process before that happens, and that's the thing that's scary. But
I mean, that's the sole scary part of the next 4 years is like,
yeah,
do I think that he held back in his first term? No, I don't think he's capable of holding back. But do I think that the people who worked with him and quote unquote him were holding back? Yes. And I think they will be like, no holds barred. This might be the only 4 year one we've got. Let's do everything we can to destroy everything.
well,
And that's
and
what
now they have control of both the Senate and the House, and they also have the Supreme Court. And those are the three things that they didn't have last time. So that's the
yeah.
thing that, there were these checks and balances the last time that were in place that are not in place now. And that's the thing that's like, okay, so he can make all these decisions and he'll have very little pushback.
Honestly, the Supreme Court, when that switched over to me, was like the scariest part of all of this because that's
Yeah,
permanent. And because, like, I mean, I don't like the disability world with the Supreme Court. Again, I put my nerd hat on, but like, many people have heard of Buck v. Bell, right? Where they made it legal to lock people in hospitals and sterilize them who they thought should not have children because, quote unquote, they were disabled.
right,
Not going to touch on the fact that the person they did that to actually had no disabilities, but whatever. That's
right.
still not overturned. Like we've overturned so many of these really problem cases in the past, but the disability one, still the law of the land. It has never been overturned. And now I have so much little hope that it will ever be overturned. And all I can think about is what other court cases are going to pile onto that that's going to hurt people like the disability community that maybe doesn't always have the same pushback later to then go overcome it. Right? Like we took back a lot of some of the sexist ones, some of the racist ones, like, but the disability ones stand because nobody gives a shit. You know?
Yeah, it's interesting to me how, we were so I don't even know how to explain it, but in its infancy, the Supreme Court was supposed to be not political. They were supposed to be politically neutral. And that's the design of the court system and the judicial system in general, is they are supposed to be non-partial. They are supposed to have, they're supposed to rule on the fairness of everything. And so they're not supposed to have a political affiliation. And at some point that changed. I don't know when that happened. And
I honestly don't know if they ever had it, but it was at least the goal.
right. And I feel like they at least try to before they at least try to put their political biases aside in their rulings, at least to some extent. And when, Ruth Bader Ginsburg was Supreme Court justice and she was sick and dying, instead of stepping down, she died while she was on the Supreme Court. And unfortunately, I mean, all thanks to her for what she did, because she was as far as groundbreaking Supreme Court justice, she was definitely it. But she did us a very big disservice in not stepping down instead of waiting for her life to end before she ended her term.
I mean, I'm more annoyed at the people who refused to appoint one under Obama and they just played a game of chicken of we're just not going to let you have it till we run out the clock. Like, that's who I'm mad at.
Well,
Like they put
that
people up and they said no.
there's there's a
Like
number of
that,
reasons why I'm ticked off. I mean,
yeah.
it would have been helpful if she would have stepped down earlier in Obama's term,
I
but
don't
would that
know.
have
I don't.
necessarily helped? I don't know. Again,
Yeah.
it's dumb
I
that
don't
they
have.
made that ruling because, then later when um was it Justice Scaglia or whatever the hell his name was, he died, then, Trump was supposed to he was leaving office in like 2 months, and then there was some absurd number, and
Yeah.
he was allowed to confirm Amy Coney Barrett to the Supreme Court. And that should never have happened.
But again, like Obama should have never been taken away from him. Like I honestly, I don't totally blame Ruth at all because the fact is they didn't, even when she died, they didn't let him do anything with it. And I think that they
No.
knew that they had to have seen the writing on the wall. And I think that's why she held on because they were
Yeah.
like, this is not going to happen. And I mean, that's more of what I'm mad at. But like the fact that that can happen in our government, they can be like, we can just ignore the rule except for when it serves us on something fundamental is what makes me just mad. But
Yeah, I mean, the lifelong appointments thing is definitely something that probably needs to go as far as the Supreme Court goes, but also there's no reason that a 91-year-old should be on the Senate. And yes, I'm talking about Senator Grassley. That man is a fossil and he should not be anywhere near the government. He needs a hearse on standby. I'm sorry, that's horrible to say. But I mean, I'm seeing him preside over these confirmation hearings. I'm like, what is going on? Why is this man who is literally almost a centenarian,
I mean,
like he's
like
literally almost 100 years old? Why is he on the Senate?
the average age of our government is just so difficult to process.
It's like what, 73?
I don't even know the fact. I just do the math in my head, but now I'm going to Google it while we talk. I'm like, hold
I
on.
I feel like we need to cuz there's a bunch of old white dudes. It's literally that's all it is. There's a few outliers. I'm happy to say that Amy Klobuchar from Minnesota is definitely an outlier. Liz Warren from Massachusetts, she's an outlier. But she's also older. I mean, she
Yeah.
probably couldn't run for
So
president again.
a year ago, 2 years ago, the average age of Congress was 58, which was 3 years younger than the year before that. And the Senate is also getting older. Their average age is 65. Yeah. Um, Another thing from 117, yeah, that's where it dropped. It used to be 65 again. Yeah, like, really? 65-year-olds? I mean, I think maybe a bunch of 17-year-olds in government could be problematic as well, but like there's this whole middle ground between both ages.
Yeah.
But I am glad to see how many young people are running though. Like
Yeah.
David Hogg, for example, right, who is one of the Parkland survivors, like he is like getting involved in government and doing it from the ground floor because he's like, this government failed all of my friends.
Mhm.
So I'm going to go change it. And I give people so much credit for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, like, I don't have the energy to do that. Mitochondrial disease. God, I wish I could go get involved in more things
Oh
than
my
I do.
god. Same.
But
Same.
I like try to do it the little fight in healthcare. I'm like, healthcare is also broken. Trying to change it from within. Like,
Yeah.
the little things to try to do. But I give so much credit to people who take on things like the government with that. It's just, yeah. Or leadership of hospitals, people who try to go in there and change it because it's so hard to change institutions. It really
Yeah.
is,
Yeah. I mean,
especially when it's
especially
the oligarch. But
well, yeah. And on the nursing side of things, I think we're seeing a great huge change in how hospitals are staffed and how nursing homes are staffed. Um in Minnesota, I will say that we do better, I think, than a lot of other states as far as healthcare. But we're also slipping. Um, there's been a lot of changes, and there's been a lot of things that in the hospital side of things that honestly, I've never worked in the hospital aside from clinical. But staffing ratios are still horrible. even in hospitals in Minnesota. And I think the big thing is that these big corporations like Mayo, for instance, are taking over healthcare. Whereas, like in the town I grew up in, they used to be a small town hospital. We had an ICU, we had a cardiac floor, we had all these things, and business was good. They did a good thing, and it was a thriving hospital. And then Mayo took over, and they don't do deliveries anymore. They don't do surgeries anymore, and it's the hospital is dying. It's essentially a band-aid station. They have an ER, they have an oncology department, they have a dialysis department, and they have a clinic. That's literally all they've got. And this is a town of over 10,000 people. So it could sustain a hospital pretty easily.
And again, like, to not have deliveries. Like, to me, if we're talking a band-aid hospital, right? Like, what are the fundamental things you need to keep a population alive? Popping babies out,
Yeah.
doing emergency surgeries, and doing some really basic primary care. Like, if you had to pick three things to survive, deliveries is not one of the ones I would take off that list. Oh, our bad, delivering a baby. Please fly to another city. Please drive a couple hours. Like, that's not practical.
No, I mean, and rural healthcare, that's how it is. I mean, when I was living in my first house when we had our first kid, we had to drive a half hour to deliver, which, I mean, for the first kid was fine. But when you're having baby number 3 plus, you have no freaking clue. I mean, I drove myself to my delivery with Nora. Granted, that was an emergency C-section. I had no way of knowing that was how that was going to go. But in true Nora fashion, that's how that happened. And that was, let's see, an hour and a half away from where we lived. And that was the closest teaching hospital where we had a maternal fetal medicine, a children's hospital, vital things that my kids needed to survive, to get the care that they needed. And I mean, I could go on. There's a lot of things, especially in like the sticks where
Yeah.
I live. I mean, I live in the middle of nowhere. I don't actually, though. I mean, I live an hour and a half from like a major metropolitan area, technically.
Well,
But
and again, like, it's just, it's, you can blame hospitals. You can blame places like Mayo. I definitely think they have a huge role in it. Like when I worked in small town PA, watching UPMC from Pittsburgh come in and buy all the hospitals while Geisinger from the other direction. They're just buying everything they can touch their hands on and shutting down a lot of stuff. But it's also like, it's insurance. You know what I mean? Like it's
yeah, I mean, it's
doctors
corporate
used to be
greed,
able,
whether it's the hospital system or insurance companies.
and that's the thing though, is like it used to be where you could be a small town doctor and have a practice, and it's just not practical anymore. Like you
No.
cannot afford to stay open. You can't afford to be in network with all these ones and jump through these hoops. And we talk about deserts all the time, but no one talks about care deserts.
Yeah.
Like,
But they exist everywhere in this country.
yeah, and they're not getting better. Like, not even
No.
close.
No. I
Like,
mean,
if anything,
especially
it's
in rural
getting worse.
areas.
Well, but even if you go to the city now, like, they're so, like you said, overrun. They have bad ratios. Like, even if you go to a city, it can take you a year or two to get seen at genetics. So, like, you don't even have to live in the middle of nowhere. Even if you live in a major hospital to try to get in to see specialists, it can take so long that it's pointless.
Oh my
Look, dogs
gosh.
are just gonna bark in the background of this podcast. That's not avoidable.
The dog literally just opened the door. I thought I shut it.
Yep.
Thank you. I thought I shut the freaking door. Okay. Well, Justin shut it for me. So thank you for that, Justin.
The dogs are not gonna be avoidable. The children are not gonna be avoidable. The parrot is not gonna be avoidable.
No, I am a parent of many children. It is just what it is. But to your point, I think part of it is having an in the hospital system, especially like when you're dealing with complex care. But like for instance, with my oldest, she had this diagnosis of infantile spasms, a very like severe seizure disorder, and she's 7, almost 8 now. Dear God. Um
I really have no idea
and
how she's almost 8. Like, nope, not possible.
but the follow-up care has been shit. I mean, when you get told that a child has a 10 to 15% chance of growing out of these seizures completely and never having another seizure again, let alone the long-term repercussions of infantile spasms, which I could get into and do a whole thing on that alone. I mean,
We probably
infantile
can eventually.
spasms, they don't look bad. They look like a startle reflex, but when you look at the statistics of children with infantile spasms, they're not good. I mean, the fact that she's doing any of the stuff that she's doing is a miracle in and of itself, because she's walking and talking and doing all these things that we were told that she may never do. And I don't, I appreciate all of that. Don't get me wrong. But the long term repercussions of that do include some degree of brain damage. And we've never been able to figure out what's happening there. And I know that knowing the brain damage won't change it. But to understand her, the way her mind works or the way her body works, would be helpful as parents, because we need to
Yeah.
know at what, like, how much can we teach her versus what can her brain realistically learn. And we've never gotten clarity on that, and we've tried to talk to a neurologist about it, and we have, let's see, how many neurologists have we had in the last like 5 years for our kids, but we cannot get a neurologist to keep her and to follow up with her even yearly, which is absurd, because yes, she's doing well, but I mean, she's neurodivergent. That in and of itself presents the need for at least yearly follow up with a neurologist.
Well, and again, it's like one of those where it's like, I get that it's hard because people are like, you can't predict the future of a kid. Like, you can't predict where your kid is going to fall on a spectrum. You do have to wait and see somewhat. Like that, sure. I know that you know that, but I'm still saying it for people who are listening.
Right.
But it's also one of those where you're like, well, but if there's a, 80 to 90% chance, I think it's something like that, that you could have some sort of intellectual disability if you had infantile spasms. In my head, wouldn't you be hooking that kid up with neuropsych evals and developmental clinics and stuff for the long term to help navigate that because it's likely to pop up
Right.
instead of hunting back to the pediatrician and being like, they'll hook you up with the right people, which I feel like it's been a shift in the last decade. Tell me if you felt this too, that it used to be like a specialist would refer to other specialists. And I feel like now everything is go back to your primary care doctor and they'll do the recommendations I say, or go back to your pediatrician. Like you can go see neurology and neurology be like, I recommend cardiology. Go ask your primary to put in that referral. And it didn't used to be that way. And again, some of that's insurance. Some insurances require a PCP does all the referrals, but that's like HMOs, which most people don't have. But we all follow that system now. And it puts such a higher burden on the patient to
Yeah.
navigate and triage everything and coordinate it, but also on the poor primary care doctor who like is could be amazing, but they're not going to know about most of this rare disease stuff at all. And that's not their fault. That's not their job.
Right. Yeah. I think we're very fortunate with the specialists that we have, especially for the girls with SMA and whatever other stuff that they have, that their neurologist will refer, and we don't have to ask anybody else. Like, if he feels that they need to be referred, he will do it. And he has. And that's one thing that I've been very fortunate with him on for them. But to to my point and to your point, when you have a kid that kind of falls through the cracks, that doesn't fall under certain categories, that's hard to quantify what their syndrome is, i- it's it becomes this kind of guessing game, and it also becomes this burden on not just the parents but also, like you said, the primary team. And that might just be a family practice doctor. I mean, pediatricians are becoming a thing of the past as well. There's not a lot of pediatric providers anymore. We're fortunate to have a pediatric clinic in town now. Where we lived, there were no pediatricians. Where we
That's
moved
interesting.
around.
We still have them around here a lot. But yeah, I mean, again, it's like they're some of the ones that go away fastest.
Yeah, and so it's unfortunate that that's where care has gone, especially with these kids that really need better care. And again, I don't know how much it would change necessarily, but it would at least give us something to go on, I guess. I don't know. I
Well,
want
but
to
I
give my
also,
kids what I didn't have.
yeah.
And that's the thing that kind of is my North Star, so to speak, is that, I've dealt with this rare disease, mito, for my entire life, and I'm now just scratching the surface of answers. And that's, I'm 30, almost 34. I don't want that to happen for my kids. If I can work for a better future for them, that's more important to me.
And I mean, agree to all of that. Start there. I just feel like it's so hard too because I see people like you and me and people who work in the healthcare field or have a lot of experience in it who have some really good doctors, right? Who are fortunate enough to have access to some that have been amazing. And still things fall through the cracks. And I'm like, okay, if we're falling through the cracks, what hope does anyone have that like didn't like have a lot of medical knowledge or doesn't have medical training or doesn't have the time because they're working three jobs to figure this all out and to take it on themselves? Like if if I can fall through the cracks, which I have for some of my care at different times in my life, if your kids can fall through the cracks when you are a hell of an advocate and have experience with all this stuff and know how it works on the back end, like what hope is there for anyone else? Like seriously though.
Right, and that's I think my concern going forward is that this is stuff that we're dealing with in this era of time, and we haven't even started 47's second term, and we're like, "Okay, what the fuck does this mean?" And we don't know. That's the end of this. The conclusion that we can come to in all of this is we don't have any freaking clue. And that I think is the most terrifying reality of this whole thing is that there's a number of hypothetical scenarios that we can come up with, and we may still be wrong on all of those fronts. And we could all just, there's a lot of ways that this could go very wrong. But there's also ways that there could be some silver linings, as you've pointed out. Reading Project 2025, which I don't have the time nor the emotional bandwidth
Audiobooks,
to read.
3.5x speed on Spotify.
There you go. Um, if anybody has the desire to do that, there you go. I myself have been watching the confirmation hearings for the cabinet members, and honestly,
I can't get
don't
myself
know
to
if
do
that's
that.
helpful or not.
I can't do it.
I don't consume it in large pieces. I will say, like, I will watch like an hour or two and then take a break because some of those hearings are like 4 hours long.
Yeah,
Um, And
not
the truth of the matter is most of these cabinet members, if not all of them, will be confirmed. That's just what it is. I mean, they have a Republican House and Senate. There's not a whole lot that the Democrats are going to be able to do to prevent these confirmations. However unqualified these candidates are, which most of them are very unqualified. Um, I mean, you can start with the Secretaries of Health and Human Services or the Centers for Medicaid and Medicaid Services. It's interesting. They come from TV. They're billionaires. There's a lot of common themes he did not learn from his first term on, dealing with his cronies and surrounding himself with smart people. Um, so that does not help.
I mean, I think if anything he did learn. He learned that he doesn't want people
No, he wants yes
nearby.
men. He wants
Yeah, like
yes
he
people that are
learned that
gonna
trying to
do what he
people in who
wants.
actually were good at it, they were the ones that got axed. Like
Right.
and good at it by like know something about politics, not I think that they were good. But I mean, I think with all rare disease stuff, right? Like what you were saying, we're used to uncertainty. And I think we're used to we never know what tomorrow is going to bring. But in my head, that's for my body, for
Mm-hmm.
my unpredictable condition. But now it's become I don't know what tomorrow will bring for basic laws, for basic healthcare options.
Right.
Like with COVID, the whole healthcare system went to shit in a way
Yep.
that I think we all could see that it was coming, but that just sped that process up into 4x speed. And so I think now we're stuck with these more fundamental, scary unknowns because it's scary enough to really not know what your body's going to do tomorrow. Like, will I start, for me, having seizures? I actually could. I have no idea.
Right.
But to be like, and then if that happens, who knows if my local hospital I can afford to go in, if I will even have insurance if I go on disability, that you'll be able to get the supplies you need for your kids to keep them alive. Like, that is such a scarier to me unknown than like the
Right.
unknown of what the hell my body will do. That I've come more to peace with. But knowing that like
Right.
if my body goes to shit, there might be nothing there to catch me.
Right.
And what's there to catch me is already half gone. That's truly, I think, what's terrifying to so many of us and like disrupting our sleep and destroying our mental health and all of that, which it is. And that's something you can't plan as much for, right? Like there's not a way to plan for that kind of apocalypse in terms of laws and medicine.
Right. I will say, and I think this is something that, as somebody who's been, we have a condition that's not going to get better. It's going to progress at some point. It's not immediately terminal, but we have no idea what that looks like. Um, and we've dealt with that reality, I think. We've all gone through that process as much as we possibly can, and we've dealt with our bodies failing us in various ways. But we've always had the safeguard of knowing that, there's palliative care, there's hospice services, there's things out there that will help us when that time comes. And knowing that that might not be there, I think is the most terrifying thing. Like you're saying, those uncertainties, those laws that could be a thing of the past, or, those dollars that could be allocated elsewhere. Those things are scary.
And you know it more than anyone. Like you've worked in hospice type scenarios. You've worked
Yeah.
with people who, without these systems in place, they would have just been completely screwed. Like you've seen that happen over and over. Like you've seen what that end looks like. And like, and you face it in such a even more real reality than I do with your kids of like, if you lose access to these drugs, because there actually are drugs that are helping your kids,
Right.
like you see, like that's what could go away. Well, for other people, I think it's so easy to just put on your tunnel vision and be like, well, I'm going to stay happy and healthy and fine, so I can ride this out. And it's like, no, if Medicaid goes away, your kids can't ride this shit out. That's not possible.
Yeah.
And I don't think even I can get that as much. Even if I feel like I do, I don't think I can fundamentally get that the same way that you can because it is your babies.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the hardest part, is that at least when Amelia died, we had hospice. And I mean, not I mean, obviously that scenario, as you well know, and we'll get into this later, that did not go the way that it was supposed to, and we know for next time what, needs to go differently. Um, and the sad part is there will be a next time. And that's one of the only guarantees that I have in this life, is that I will probably bury, if not one, maybe two more of my children before I'm dead. Which is a horrible reality to even have to swallow. And then the fact that there's this medication that it's not making them better, but it is slowing the progression of their disease, which without this medication, they would have died several years ago. I mean, Nora's 6 now.
Life saving, even if it's not making them somehow immortal. Like, yeah,
Right.
it's life saving.
Yeah. I mean, it's people don't understand that, they're like, "Oh, don't you want a cure?" I'm sorry to say this, but cures are not realistic in the spectrum of genetic rare disease. It's just not.
Agreed. No, I think the cure narrative is selling false hope, and we need
It
to deal with
100%
reality.
is, because if you do find cures for these diseases, A, they're not going to be affordable. B, they're going to start this fountain of youth effect. And there's so many genetic diseases. How are you going to find targeted therapies for each and every one? You can't. You just can't. So the
I
whole
mean, the treatments your
idea,
family has, they are the miracle. Like, they were the big hope.
exactly. So we're finding these gene therapies, we're finding all these things, and they're not bad, they're not broken. I mean, they're revolutionary medicine, don't get me wrong. But
But
to hope for this magical cure that's going to make your kids better or that's going to, reverse your disease, it's just not realistic. And expecting the cure to come is just not, it's not serving you, unfortunately. I mean, the only guarantee that we have in life is that it's going to end at some point. And the other guarantee that we have is that you're going to be disabled in some way at some point in your life. That is just the reality of life. And some of us have lived with disability for just a lot longer than others. Two of my kids have been disabled for their entire lives. And you and I have probably been disabled in one shape or form for our entire lives. And we've just dealt with it. But it's not helping us to have this magical hope for a cure. I guess I lost hope for that a long time ago. And when I hear people saying, "Well, don't you want a cure?" I'm like, "No. I would like a better quality of life. I would like to not be in pain all the time. I would like to be able to eat without feeling like my body is just rebelling against it."
yeah,
Those are the things that I would like. It's not a high bar, folks. It's really not.
again, I would like to feel like in the next 4 years, I might not lose Medicaid. May not have any.
100%.
I'm saying that on your behalf, but like, not a high bar, not even close, just little bar.
No, and the fact that the bar is so low is both sad and wonderful at the same time because we've learned, we've accepted, right? We're at that place of acceptance in our lives. We've gone through that grief process, and that grief process changes from time to time. You get to the thing of acceptance and you think
Cycle
that
will
there's
come back
acceptance there.
eventually, but
100%. People are like, "Oh, you're done with your grief thing." No, you're not done with your grief thing. I hate to break it to you folks. If you've lost a loved one, you will grieve for the rest of your life. If you've had a disability and you have an illness that continues to take things from you, you're going to grieve that for the rest of your life in one shape or form. Just when you think that you've come to terms with a quality of life that you had, it changes. And then you're like, oh, shit, I have a new quality of life that I have to accept and I don't like it. And you go
yep.
through it all over again. It's just it's just a process. And one thing that I've done to get myself ready for this ridiculousness that's going to be the next 4 question mark years is stocking up on supplies. I've maxed out orders for like the last 2 months now for the kids to make sure that we have a surplus. That is something that is in our state we've been able to do because they have like limits that it's ridiculous. Like we get 5 trachs a month and some people get like 1 trach every 2 months or something like that. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So we're able to do that so that we have these things to fall back on in case Medicaid decides to not pay for something, and then we're like, okay, well, we've got this backstock. Is
I
that
don't
going
know if
to
there's just a disruption, right? Like even if it's not it's gone forever, but shit hits the fan, someone switches a role, someone screws up funding, something happens, like you have a tiny cushion to try to get through it. Just a little.
is it going to last us for the next 4 years? No, not even close. But it's a thing that I can do that makes me feel better about my family's chances. And I guess
I
for
guess
me,
for me,
that's one
one
actionable step
actionable
that I can take that makes me
that
feel like I'm actually doing something.
I mean, we all
Or
have to figure out what that is. And for some people, that's trying to save every penny they have. For some people, it's trying to make sure you get as many of your med refills as you can. For some people, it's going back to therapy and being like, all right, this is going to be needed. Let me reestablish my care. And sometimes you feel like you can do nothing because you're barely surviving right now. And that still counts as you're doing something, you're surviving. Like, that's all some people can do. And that
yeah.
sucks, but also that's totally fair.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just going to be very interesting to see how this all plays out, and I hope that it does not, destroy the things that have, you know, gone well the last 4 years. Because as much as we can say that there were some things that did not go well, there are a lot of things that went very well in the last 4 years. Politics notwithstanding, I mean, there's things that
Yeah.
went better that could have gone so much worse.
I mean, comes back to that cure narrative, right? It's like, do I want a cure? No, I just want things to suck less than the most that they could. And like that's the same as politics. Like, do I expect everything to go great? No. But if it could just be like 2 bars above the lowest bar, that would be amazing.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I mean, I laugh. One of my favorite song lyrics is like, "Smile, the worst is yet to come." And I joke that it's my life philosophy. I'm like, look, shit's gonna hit the fan. Shit is gonna suck. Like your condition's gonna progress. People you care about are gonna pass away. That's guaranteed future.
Yep.
So till then, smile and figure out what you can do to create joy and be happy with what you have
Yep.
till you go through the new cycle of grief and things go to hell in a handbasket and then you figure it out again.
Yeah.
I'm like that's how I cope. People are like, how are you happy when things are falling apart? I'm like, well, because I have little cute things on my desk like potatoes and avocados that are supportive and like does that help if a friend is passing away? Not terribly,
No,
but it makes
not
the
at
bar
all.
slightly lower than the lowest bar. Like
Yeah.
at least things are colorful as they go down in flames.
Right. I mean, fortunately, we haven't had in our close friend group a loss recently. I hate to even say it.
I was like, no, don't you just don't jinx it. No,
I know.
it's been too long. Don't play that card, Sam. What are you doing?
I
Not that I
know.
believe in fate or whatever, but like still, I still can't but help you. Like, oh, you said it. Why did you say
I'm
it?
not superstitious, but I'm a little stitious. No, but
Uh,
it changes it there we've been back and forth with so many of our friends for so long, and it's exhausting and sad and horrible. And I think having the group that we do and being able to find all of the ridiculous dumb stuff that we find funny, or just talking about the random shit that we talk about. um I mean, it kind of started, I don't even remember. I was trying to think about, like, when we started being friends.
I think you and I started chatting all the time was with your first pregnancy.
Yeah.
Because I remember we started chatting about prenatal genetic stuff because I was learning about it.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Living it.
Yeah, that's
And I
true.
think that's how it started. And that was before we even knew that like how how into genetics your family would get with this stuff. Like before we knew
Yeah,
SMA was a thing for
right.
you. But we were talking about just like pregnancy and screening and like trying to figure it all out. And then we transitioned from that into trauma bonding.
Yeah, I mean, that is one thing that it did happen. Like, I think we started actually being friends, like, right before Justin and I got married. Like, that's when we started becoming friends on Facebook. And then it evolved over time into just, like, casually chatting. And then I don't remember. It
With
evolved from
pregnancy,
there.
I think it was like
Yeah,
with pregnancy, we started sending long messages back and forth and trying to figure out like what you do and what do you care, like all this stuff.
yeah,
And then when Millie was born,
yeah,
we started talking constantly because there
yeah,
was something going on there, but we couldn't
yeah,
figure out what it was.
yeah.
And then we trauma bonded into sisters.
Pretty much. I mean, that is really how it went. And I mean, we were close before that, but I think
Yeah, yeah.
that is really what made that. And then obviously all of what happened with Lydia,
And
and
then the trauma never stopped.
it didn't. And that's the thing, is that, I mean, there is something to be said for trauma bonding, but it's not, it makes a great friendship, I guess.
It's one of those, I would never wish it upon another,
Right.
but it also has made some of the best connections I've ever had in my life. Like, my trauma bonded friends are those friends that, like, ride or die, I've got you, you've got me. Like, it is hard to blow that friendship up. Like,
Right. And at some point, one of us is probably going to show up on the other's doorstep because shit hit the fan in some way, shape, or form where we're just like, I fuck this. I am going to just fly to you.
I mean,
And
we kind of did that this year already.
we did. And I was very surprised that that worked out as well as it did.
Like, I was like, hey, I'm going to Portland for a doctor's appointment. You want to come say hi? And you were like, hey, I bought tickets. I'm on the way. Like,
Yeah,
literally.
I was
And that
not
was because
expecting that
we
to work
needed it.
out.
Like, it was not just politics, it was shit going on in our personal lives, both of us dealing with major grief
Yeah.
and processing. And it was essentially that. We're like, wait, if there's an opportunity to end up in the same room on a couch, traumatized together, we cannot pass this up.
Unfortunately, Andrew got kind of roped into that, but he was a good sport about it.
I don't think the other people were a problem. They got to have us get lots of fun delivery foods and binge watch movies on their couch. Like, it wasn't like coming along for the trauma ride wasn't a good time.
No, I mean, I think we're hilarious, so I think they enjoyed themselves.
But also, I feel like when people say, like, trauma, it's not like we get together and all we do is talk about trauma. Like, we're
No.
so just like beaten up from the world that when we get together, we just want to exist in the same space. Like, that's what's healing. We don't have to talk about it. We don't have to not talk about it. We don't have to go do fun, exciting things. We don't have to, like, go bar hopping or go to see tourist stuff. Like, we, our only goal, again, it's not a big goal. We want to exist in the same bubble. We just want to be there together.
And it
We don't
worked
want
out
to
very
share. We
well.
don't want to. We don't want a whirlwind trip around Europe. We just want to sit in an Airbnb on a couch and watch early 2000s movies.
Oh, Harry Potter. That was actually, I there was a lot about those movies that I did not realize that I forgot about until I watched them again and I was like, "Man, every time I watch them and I've watched them I don't know how many times, but it's always I think it's a millennial thing going back to like what you know and it's like a comfort thing."
Yeah, no, like I've been rereading all of the books now too, and I'm like, I listened to these books on repeat as a child. It was my first audiobook. How did I know that would I did not realize I'd end up with how addicted I am to audiobooks now. But like listening to them, I've listened to them dozens of times and I'm still like, oh, I totally missed that. But again, you're right. Like, it's comfort. It's when everything in life isn't controllable,
Yep.
familiar things that have state dependent memory, like you remember the mental state you were in when you first encountered something,
Right.
that is comforting.
Yeah.
There's a time when we didn't realize what chaos our life would become when we used to listen to them
Yeah. I mean,
or watch them or read them or whatever.
there was somebody I was watching something about it and I think Harry Potter came out around the same time as 9/11. And that makes so much sense in retrospect. I'm like, "Oh my god. No wonder the millennials have such like a trauma bond to Harry Potter and like that series." But there was the lady that played Professor Sprout.
Yeah.
She put something about, well, I don't understand why the Harry Potter fans are still like on about Harry Potter. Like it was 20 years ago. And there was this guy that was like, Avada Kedavra. That's the funniest thing.
Yeah. I mean, I think it could have happened with any long term escape novel, right?
Right.
Like, why are people so emotionally attached to things like Lord of the Rings? I think it's very similar for a different
Oh yeah.
generation. That was the book that was the first escape from reality that was long enough that you really dove into the world and you felt like you were a part of it, which you
Right.
don't get when a book is only one book, right? Like, or one season of a TV show. Like, there are each book I'm reading right now, 20 some hours of audio. Like, you're
Mhm.
literally spending weeks in that world. And I'm counting
Yeah.
like while you're actively reading or listening or watching. Like, not even like in your own head or as you've read the books over years, so it's like 10 years of your life. Like you're actually devoting a lot of time to this.
Right.
And I think it's the same way some people bond to some TV shows that were like that, where every day after school they watch the same show for like a decade. Like you've invested in this other world that let you out of your current world. And, you can blame screen addictions and all that jazz, but dude, it's so nice to be able to escape every once in a while. We all need that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think too, I noticed during the height of the COVID pandemic, everybody was playing Animal Crossing. I'm sure you
I didn't. I skipped it. I skipped the
well,
trend, but you were right. Everyone did it.
yeah,
Yeah.
because it came out, like, right around the same time, and I was like, "Man, so many people bonded over that video game." And it's a very similar situation where it's like, "Okay, we don't have anything else to do because we can't leave home, and so we're just gonna play this video game and mess around with it." And it's very similar, and I think every generation to some degree has that. It just depends on, like, what. And for a lot of millennials, I think that's Harry Potter. And I know one of the nurses that we have that comes into our house was like, "Well, you know how there's Harry Potter houses and there's Lord of the Rings houses." And I was like, "You're not wrong. You're not wrong." I personally tried to read The Hobbit and I could not get past the first chapter because it just takes so long to get going.
I have never tried to read them, but I also cannot watch the movies.
No, they're
I have
very
tried,
long.
no, literally, I have friends have tried to make me watch the first Lord of the Rings movie at least 5 times in my life. And every time I make it like 20 minutes far in before I just wander out of the room. It's whenever they start fighting, when it just becomes like the war scene that lasts like an hour. Suddenly Devin went to make popcorn and just never came back. Like, literally,
Yeah.
I'm gone. But I think there were other series. Like, for me, Harry Potter had that. And I think it lasted so much longer because we got the movies afterwards and like, things
Mhm.
continued to come out. Like, for me, the Tamora Pierce books were more of the world I escaped into when I was in middle school. And she had like 12 different mini series all placed in the same world. And so like it had that same like you really felt like you were part of it. And they
Yeah.
talked about making movies and TV shows and it never happened. And part of me wonders like how many people would actually know what I'm talking about if that had happened because I think it does broaden the audience.
Yeah, for
But
sure.
I'm not going to say that Harry Potter is a magical book that like in terms of it is magical. But like
Right.
was the perfect book that hit all the points and really was this work of art. But I filled a need that people had at a time, and it felt
Right.
people. And a lot of the tropes that now exist in the fantasy world weren't as well known and cemented, so it didn't feel like it was just repeating the same stuff as a lot of the books these days do.
Right.
And so it was a perfect storm, worked out for it really well.
Yeah.
And that's just the reality of it. And we all need coping mechanisms, and for some people that's trashy reality TV, some people that's fantasy books. For some people, that's hiking in the woods, and just getting away from the world. But I feel like
I
we shouldn't.
myself
We need to
would
know.
die.
Yeah, I don't think we'd hike far into the woods.
No.
We'd hike
No,
to
we'd
like
get eaten
the
by
first
bears.
bend where you can't see the road, and we'd be like, "We did it!" But I just hate when people shame fans for this kind of stuff. Like,
Right.
I'm not a Swiftie, but I'm not going to shame people who love her. Like, if she's your escape from reality and getting out of your own brain and the shit show we're surrounded by, the dumpster fire,
Mhm.
so much power to you,
Right.
right? Like, if video games get you out of your head, can we not shame teenagers for being in their room on games? They have an online community, they're getting out of their head. That's amazing.
Right.
The world is
Yeah.
going to hell in a handbasket. We can't judge people how they cope with it within
Right.
reason, right? Like, as long as you're not an asshole to other people, like,
Yeah. I mean, I've been doing a lot of playing video games and it works largely. As long as I don't get too tired. Like last night I played 2 rounds of a video game and then I fell asleep in bed with my contacts in, which I don't recommend. Don't do that. No,
oh
trying to
yeah.
put my contacts in this morning, I was like, you know how that is.
I thought you meant you're
During your
trying to put them in on top of your old ones, like you hadn't even taken them out.
No, I took them out at 3:30 this morning. I woke up at 3:30 this morning and took out my contacts, went to the bathroom, did all those things, and then I could not go back to sleep until 5
Yeah.
because gastroparesis, and I was like,
Yeah, it's
2
dangerous
doses
when
of
you do that.
Zofran
You
later.
play that game of you're like, will I be up for an hour and a half? Can I somehow be only up for 5 minutes? Let's see.
Well, and
But
we had night nursing last night too, so I was like, maybe I can get some sleep. The answer is no, I cannot.
you just go hang out with the night nurse. Like, I'm up, you're up, let's go hang. Or you're trying to fall
No,
back asleep, so you don't want to
I
act
do
like
try to
you're
go
not
back to sleep
realizing.
because I try to keep it as quiet for Nora to sleep as I can. So, like, if there's a lot of activity, she'll like be like, "Oh, something's going on. I should wake up." And we're like,
Yeah,
"No, you need to sleep."
that's bad. Yeah, no, that's
So,
super bad.
especially with all of the sleep issues that she's had recently, so I'm hoping we can get all those things figured out too, um, with all of the sleep medicine and palliative care and
Again, the bar is not high. You just
no,
want
it's
her to
not.
be able to sleep. Like,
Yeah,
you don't want much in life. Just a nap. A successful nap, please. Thank you.
right.
Bye.
Yeah. But to conclude, this ridiculousness that was no, I think we got some good points. Um the bottom line is that this is going to be bad in some way. I mean, it's not going to be fun. That is the reality. Um so we're going to just have to figure out a way to get through it, and I am hoping to have figure out some ways around the ridiculousness of all of this. But I myself will not be watching on Inauguration Day. I have no desire. I will not be feeding into any of it. I think a lot of people are going to be boycotting social media that day.
Yeah, I don't know what I'm going to be doing, but it's definitely not going to be watching it. That
No.
much I can guarantee. There probably will be chocolate involved. There might be like a nice dinner of some sort, like even if it's just buying myself like fancy pasta, like, self-care this shit. Probably some loud music, probably some disassociation, like, just whatever you need to get through that day.
Yeah. Yep. Stay in contact with your people. I think that's one thing that's very, very important. Do not lose contact with family, friends, all of those people. That's who you're going to need in these times.
Yeah.
Um, Therapy is very helpful. I'm strongly suggesting that anybody who's feeling any sort of existential dread, it's not a bad thing to have in your pocket, honestly. Having a person there just to talk to that is impartial, that will just allow you to feel your feelings, it's not a bad thing. It's not a sign of weakness. It's very helpful. I myself have been going to therapy now weekly for quite a while. Ever since actually my grandma's death, I've pretty much been going weekly. And it
Helps you.
doesn't make the trauma less traumatic. It does not, but it does help you learn how to cope. And I do think that that's one thing that you've got to figure out your coping mechanisms and those things that are going to help you get through it, because again, it's not going to be fun. It's not going to be great, but we have to figure out a way to get through, because I think the biggest thing that we can't do is throw our hands up in the air and proclaim that everything is going to go to shit and that we've got to just give up, because that's what they want. So we have to find ways to get through. We have to find ways to get involved. I would say voting. Vote in your midterms, vote every chance that you can get to get people in that are going to change things. If you don't like the way things are going, voting is going to be the best way to get involved. And I mean, peaceful
And there are
protest if you feel
so
like
many
you
ways
need
to
to.
get involved, though. I mean, like right now, it is pretty much infinite groups you can volunteer for, small commitments, big commitments, in person, virtual, texting only, phone calls only, like mailing only. There's so many options that whatever flavor of getting involved works for your life, you can find that with only a little bit of effort.
I would say do it sooner than later. Given the circumstances, I would not put it past them for media control and controlling what we are seeing out on the internet. So make sure that you get those resources soon. just because I'm not. I mean, it could be a while before all of those things go into place, but in totalitarian governments and people that take control,
I
that's a
mean,
very common thing.
I mean, they've already bought most of small town media, so it's already happened.
That's what I mean. I mean, it's just going to get worse. So putting those contexts out there sooner than later and having those making contacts outside of social media if you need them, I think is important as well, especially like if for some reason, for whatever reason, you're like, hey, I'm not going to be on Facebook anymore. If you have people on Facebook that you want to be in contact with, make sure you get their contact information, like however that looks, be it by email, by phone, whatever. I know that for a lot of us in the rare disease community, social media is a huge tool, and there's a very real possibility that those things could be changed in some way, shape, or form. So make sure that you find those ways to communicate in case something happens. I mean, I know that that sounds weird and a little bit doomsday-y, but honestly, it's important. I know that we've I think was it during COVID that we started that where we were getting each other's phone numbers and stuff just in case.
We had an emergency contact list for our group of friends, and it wasn't COVID. It was just when people got sick, like hospice
Yeah,
level sick, and stopped responding, or we didn't hear from them for a couple of weeks. We had this fun realization of like, we have no way to find out if they were hit by a car or not.
right.
Like, and so we're like, emergency contact list. But again, like it is a different culture than when our parents were growing up. We're like, you walk down the street, you knew where their cell phones were. Like, you had all this stuff memorized. If your phone dies, if your Facebook just gets hacked and you lose access to it, there's so many little things that can come up that having stuff like that saved is just not a bad idea.
No. I think that's where I'm getting at is that there's a lot of different scenarios that could come up, like the TikTok ban, for instance. You know, that's not hot
Yes,
on
where
everybody's minds right now.
today. Isn't TikTok going away today or tomorrow?
It's, I believe,
I believe
tomorrow.
tomorrow. Yeah, it's like it's this weekend.
It's tomorrow. Tomorrow is TikTok is no more as of tomorrow.
Now you know when we were recording this. Um,
Well, who cares?
but no, I'm just laughing. Like it's now. It's happening. But yeah, no,
No, I
I
mean it
mean,
is.
yeah.
So I mean it's already happening. These things are changing, and it just finding those people that you can connect with, however that looks, is just important. And if you feel like you need those contacts outside of social media, find them and find them soon. I guess that's my point. Um,
Community matters. I mean, community is one of the only things you have when everything goes to shit. So
exactly. And in
build
the
your
rare disease
community.
community, in the, medically
Yeah.
complex community, that's huge. And I think we've relied on social media for so long that it's very hard to like be like, oh my God, what are we gonna do now that social media is kind of in question a little bit? Like,
I don't think it's going anywhere. I'm not as extremist with
I
you with your
don't think Facebook is going anywhere. No, I don't think it's going
it's more of
anywhere.
a pain
But
in the ass. It's already more of a pain in the butt with censorship and shit, but like it's
that's
not
what
going.
I'm more questioning is like, how much do I want to associate with Facebook anymore?
Yeah.
I
But
mean, given all those circumstances, but that's a whole other topic and we don't have a lot of time. So,
yep, I was like, we're not opening that can of worms. Nope. Shut that. Check in the back burn.
nope, nope. I don't even know how this is going to go because I'm sure there are people on the political spectrum in the rare disease community that are going to be like, well,
Then they
this
can
is
listen to this
interesting.
episode. Whatever. It's uncensored is in the title. You're not going to dance around the reality of this. Like, yeah,
No,
political views, but some views are trying to keep rare disease kids alive, and some views are like, go survive on your own, good luck. So I do
100%.
think there's a right answer here, and I'm not going to censor that.
That's my point. And I think
Yeah.
the more that we are unapologetically vocal about these things, the more things are going to change. I mean, we can't just pretend that these things are not happening and say, "Oh, well, sorry, too bad."
So we
No,
don't talk about politics. Politics is survival for disabled people. Politics is personal. It's every aspect of our freaking lives.
it
So if
is.
you
And
you
that's
don't care about politics, that just means you have enough privilege. You don't give a shit about other people.
exactly. And I think people are going to realize that more and more as time goes by. But anyway,
Hopefully. On that note, we love everybody, but no.
Yes, enough of this. We have a number of topics to cover in the weeks to come, and we're excited about covering all of them. It will not always be this political, I promise. But politics
Yeah.
will come into play. I mean, that's just the reality of our lives.
You have to get it off your brain so you can talk about everything else too.
Yes, absolutely. So this was our kind of brain dump of the politics and all of the crap that's about to come, but there will be other topics, I promise. But yeah. Thanks for hanging out with us, Devin. We appreciate it.
Yeah.
And
Thanks for
agreeing to
hanging
be
out
our
with us, the entire world listening to this. Welcome to
basically
our
being
channel.
our co-host for question mark amount of time.
Exactly.
But all right. Well, you guys all stay safe out there, and we will see you again very soon for another podcast episode.